is with us!
Hello, my name's Houston, and this is Media Mood Board. Yes, my name's Houston, and this is Media Mood Board, a weekly show about hyper-specific entertainment lists. This week, we're taking a look at 2023's Final Fantasy XVI and asking, is it any good? In all honesty, I'm only medium interested in if Final Fantasy XVI is good or not, whatever good means. I picked it up because it's playing with some interesting themes, and I was interested in seeing how they executed that on a game level. So in this video, we're just going to explore the story, the gameplay, see what they were trying to do, the techniques they tried to do to achieve that, and then examine if we think they were successful or not, or what we can learn from them. This is a no spoiler review, so no worries. I've written a kind of back of the box style synopsis of kind of what goes on in the opening few minutes and opening cinematic of the game. This is also on the promotional material, so this is not any spoilers unless promotional materials are considered spoilers for you. It'll just give you a chance to get to know what we're talking about and kind of just a base level of what this game's trying to do.
Hey there, Editor Houston here. I did write out a whole thing, and it's pretty good, but it slows down the review too much, so all you really need to know is that there are demigods in the game who choose one human on Earth, and they gift them their powers. At the beginning of the game, the main character sees his family killed, and because he can use magic, he is enslaved, and he is made to go fight in a war. Have fun.
In Final Fantasy XVI, or FF16 as we'll call it from here on, you play as Clive Rosfeld, and you pick up the day after he escapes his enslavement and goes on his journey of revenge. I say you play the role of Clive Rosfeld because this is a role-playing game, and even more than other Final Fantasy games in which you're given a cast of colorful characters to get to choose between and hear the banter between them, and this one you take the place of one singular person and just follow them through the whole story. As far as what you do in the game, there are really three main verbs: fight, gather, and talk. Ultimately, what this actually looks like is you get plopped into this kind of large area, you run around, get into fights, find things, talk to people, watch a cutscene, do another fight, and then you go to a different area. Fighting is mainly what you're doing in this. It's a combat-focused game. And the combat, it has some strategy to it, but for the most part, it's more about getting you in your body than getting you in your head. Like, how many times can I hit this guy, not how should I hit this guy? There is opportunity for strategy, of course, but these come more into play with bosses or even just special enemies that you come across occasionally on side quests and things. Like I said, normally in Final Fantasy you have a group of people, and part of the difficulty curve of the game is as the enemies get stronger and your team levels up, you learn how to strategize between all of your different characters. Okay, this person's going to heal while this person's casting a spell. This person sticks up front and takes a brunt of the damage, things like that, you know. But the combat in FF16 is more about getting your adrenaline up. Not just in the combat, but in every other way, it is a stripped down experience as well. It's a bullet of a game trying to present the most frictionless story possible. You can't change costumes. There's not a super big strategy behind what weapons or armor you use outside of just basically whatever you got most recently. I think I died maybe once in the whole game, and I played on normal difficulty, and I think that level of difficulty is very intentional. A lot of times the Final Fantasy series feels like it's only referencing itself. This game feels very influenced by media outside of itself. During the pre-production of FF16, the director gave to the crew a box set of the Game of Thrones TV show, as well as a copy of the video game God of War from 2018. A lot of people have drawn the comparisons between FF16 and Game of Thrones. FF16 is also an earth tone drama with long scenes of seeing historical movements of troops on a map. And on top of that, it has the page-turnery blockbuster feel that the Game of Thrones series does. God of War 2018 is the story about this old man who's a god, who he goes on a journey up a mountain to spread his wife's ashes. And the way that God of War 2018 integrates story and gameplay is similar to the approach that Final Fantasy 16 ends up utilizing itself. FF16, more than any other Final Fantasy game, has a conversation with modern AAA titles. Games with a super zoomed in perspective on a character where it's very, very role play. It's not your own character. You're not putting yourself on this character. You're playing this person that the game creators have authored. The big cinematic stories of Naughty Dog, like Last of Us or Uncharted. Cinematic action games like God of War 2018 or Red Dead Redemption 2. Games where it's not about you putting yourself on the character, it's about having gameplay that really puts you in the shoes of the character that you're playing. This is an authored experience, and some of the quirks of the gameplay communicate with what type of person you're playing. This stripped back approach that Final Fantasy 16 takes is in an effort to immerse you in the character as much as possible, so that over the course of your 20, 30, 40 hours, you can feel the growth of this character very intimately, exploiting the interactivity that games have to, get in the head of a character in a way just watching them can't. They want you to really feel the change, or at least that's the goal. In God of War 2018, we're in the shoes of an ex-soldier who's trying to move past his past that just seems to keep catching up with them. He's isolated himself from his history, and through the course of the game, he has to confront these things and see how you can safely integrate things back into your life. How to deal with your past sins and process those and move forward. We're with him the whole way, and part of the goal of the gameplay in that game is to make you feel that change of character. As FF16 opens up from just Clive's revenge story into something bigger, the game asks us to explore his headspace a little bit more. After escaping imprisonment, Clive is taken in by a band of outsiders and joins them and tries to help them build up their community. As he does so, he rises in ranks himself, taking more and more responsibility, growing from an isolated soldier who's been hurt and betrayed to someone who is more selfless and community-focused. It's ultimately a story about a soldier becoming a leader. So how does FF16 approach this storytelling challenge in their gameplay? The answer is not very effectively. I love conceptually the idea of as a character grows and their perspective changes on their environment and their life, we get different types of gameplay, or the gameplay that you have adjusts or changes, or you get different options. But unfortunately, the mechanics of this game never open up to embrace that theme. It's a story about a soldier becoming a leader, but the verbs in the game never evolve beyond soldier. He seems to always have the same approach. No matter how much he grows, the tools that you have at your disposal are very rudimentary and only seem to complement a soldier mindset. To illustrate further, we can kind of break Clive's story down into 3 sections. A soldier fighting for himself, a soldier fighting for his community, and then a soldier fighting for the world. Leave the known for the unknown, and then go back into the known and become the master of both worlds. If we see the known world and the unknown world as the person Clive was and the person Clive will become, the team behind FF16 takes a very literal approach to how he changes from one to the other. Within the game, there are basically 2 types of tasks. There are soldier tasks, and there are community building tasks. Both the soldier and the community building tasks draw from the same set of verbs: fight, gather, talk. The soldier ones, you're running around doing bodyguard stuff, or there's this monster like ravaging a town, or is on the outskirts of the town, or someone needs to be, escorted, or someone's lost and you need to go find them. And then the community building task can be, hey, I'm the chef. I've always wanted to cook this type of cake, but it needs a special ingredient. Could you go find this ingredient? Oh, by the way, it's in a really dangerous area. Hey, I'm the blacksmith. I need some special stones for my smithing thing. Could you get that? Hey, my daughter's mad at me. Could you talk to her and find out what's wrong? Early on, all of your tasks are soldier tasks. You're on the run. You're trying to find this beast that killed your brother. You're just going through forests, killing monsters, collecting stuff to just survive. Normal action game stuff. However, the game slowly starts introducing these community building tasks. When you move from someone who's traveling solo to being brought in by this group of outsiders, you start being given smaller responsibilities. Like, hey, you're part of this group now. Could you go take some soup from the kitchen and give it to some of the other people in this community? Things help you pull your weight and narratively so that these people are like, okay, we're housing you. You can help out around here. You can tend the garden, things like that. As the game continues, Clive gets to know the people in the community better. The community gets to know him better. They trust him more, and he gets more responsibilities. These community building quests. Final Fantasy XVI strategy here is not just to show you in cutscenes that Clive is changing, but to give you the option to engage with that change actively so that you can feel it as you are growing your relationships with these people. They want you to feel like you're opening up to the world. They want you to feel like you're no longer isolated. They want you to feel like you're now an invested part of this community and that you, in a way, own this community that you built as a person. They also want it to feel really natural. And a risky choice that they do is almost none of these community building tasks are mandatory. There's maybe 70 plus in the game. Only about 10 of them you're forced to do within the story. The rest of it is really up to you to engage with. This is what's so cool. It's a very uniquely video game approach to storytelling. Rarely in non-interactive media will the entire arc of the character rely on elements that you are not required to engage with. The naturalness of Clive's growth from this like lone soldier to a community leader hinges on you engaging with these community building tasks and feeling that growth. The narrative does continue regardless of the amount that you've completed. So the arc is still in place in the cutscenes and in the dialogue and how the story goes. But the change kind of rings hollow if you haven't played these community building side quests. Not to say that the story doesn't work if you haven't engaged in the side quest, but the side quests fill out the world and all of the characters in it, including your own, in ways that the main story is just not interested in. I really love the ambition of this storytelling style. I want to talk a little bit, though, about ways that I don't think that it was implemented into the game in a way that does the idea justice or contributes to this storytelling style working. So obviously one of the big questions that designers are going to have are, how do we make people want to do the optional material, the material that changes him from who he was into who we want him to be at the end of the game? If we're not forcing people to do these quests, how do we convince them to? Obviously, you want your world to be engaging enough that people just naturally want to dig into all the nooks and crannies. And that's kind of a little too esoteric or a little too big of a thing to say. How do you get people to engage in the world you've built? Is make a cool world. That's not helpful. Even me, who really loves engaging with the internal ecosystem and kind of the characters within a game, I really like world building and often will go out of my way to do things like walk instead of run because I think it looks more natural. I quit doing the side quests about 10 quests in for two reasons. One, the quests weren't really fun. It was mostly running and talking and listening to somebody say something arbitrary and then running back somewhere else. The prizes weren't good. They were just sometimes marginally better than what I already had, or it's just a crafting ingredient and a small amount of XP that I could get from just fighting a 2-second fight. But I could look past those things if I felt like it immersed me in the game more. I think one of the biggest missteps that they took is that there are several time skips in the game. And because of that, as long as he's still a part of the community, his reputation is going to raise off screen while we're not with him. It takes away any ownership of you feeling like you have control over this. If you're working to build your reputation in the community and be a part of the environment, for instance, when I mentioned that soup quest, that's a real quest, and I felt like, okay, cool, you know what, I'm doing my part, I'm being a part of this community, I feel good about what I'm doing, and I feel immersed in it. A little later on in the game, when there's a time skip, I'm no longer interested in engaging with these things because they're no longer relationships that what's happened in between. I didn't learn enough about the characters to say ooh, let's see what they look like now. They're too flat. So I just was completely turned off by wanting to do it. Only later, while researching this, did I found out that mid and late game, there are some really interesting story beats that happen, some really interesting things to flesh out things that happen in the main quest that are touched on and then exploded. You also get things you get a mount in the game so you can ride a creature around. I was just walking. You don't get that in the main quest. At its core, the community building things most often engage with the parts of the game that weren't fun or tried to kind of fit the existing verbs into a mold that didn't make sense for it. When you're doing a community building quest, it feels like a chore. It's not, a fun gameplay mechanic or anything specific. It's just like, okay, this is a real chore. I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do. I'm not excited about doing these quests. So it's not fun to play on its own. And they also did a bad job of communicating early on why you should be interested in this. If you signpost early on what types of rewards you're going to be getting from this or the importance of it, people are more likely to engage with it as the game goes on in the hopes that they will get further rewarded. So in my time with Clive, he never grew from a soldier to a leader. He never grew from using his soldier verbs to awkwardly accomplish non-soldier tasks. There wasn't an evolution of how you interacted with the community, how you helped, the ease of it. It felt like you were fighting against a brick wall the whole time. It didn't feel smoother. You didn't feel like it was more comfortable for him. Now, conceptually, that's interesting on purpose. If you say, hey, there's this person, a tiger can't change its stripes. This person is not grown, and this is an illustration of how ill-fitted they are to what they're doing, that's fine, but that's not what this game is going for. The subtitle of Final Fantasy 16 is a farewell to fate. The whole thing is about how a tiger can change its stripes. So why is the gameplay at odds with this? It doesn't serve the story. The gameplay is fighting against the story. They're not working collaboratively. I believe that the Final Fantasy 16 team de-emphasized this incentivizing of these community building quests to the detriment of the storytelling. You can tell that a lot of work was put into this game, into the story and the skeleton of all the characters and how they all tie into this theme of fate. Each major character that you meet in the game struggles with a fate that they feel bound to, and each acts as an example to examine the concept of fate. People who feel out of control of their own story due to duty to the family, passion, guilt, trauma. Early on in the game, they really make this statement clear. We see an example of someone who has defied fate and get to see the consequences of that. And we also see that foil in someone who has chosen to embrace fate. Someone born into nothing, given bad circumstances, and fate has brought them something really positive in their life and something that they almost feel enraged at people who would try and go against that. And so the whole game is kind of asking what is fate? Can you break it? If you can, is it even worth it? Ultimately, because the gameplay does not interact with the story that they're trying to tell, Final Fantasy 16 feels like an Olympic-sized kiddie pool. A better Wikipedia article than a book. They present an ambitious amount of really cool concepts, but unfortunately don't explore them in any meaningful way. Even within the world building outside of the gameplay, things like these demigods and their vessels, they don't really examine that relationship at all. What does it feel like when they communicate with each other? When one gets possessed by the other? What is their relationship like? How does it feel? There's a disease in the game that affects people as they use magic. How does that feel? How does it even work? Throughout the game, the player gains more fighting abilities from these kind of demigods. How does it feel when he's interacting with these ones that he's not a part of? Instead of addressing those in an interesting way, they're just treated as a standard level up or upgrade. I love how ambitious this game is, and I really do think it's the prettiest game that I've seen of the current console generation. And while I do think that, unfortunately, the ideas in this are so much stronger than the execution of those ideas, I really do believe there's so much to learn from what it's trying to do, regardless of its success. And it is fun. It's not that it's not a fun game, but you can just see bubbling under the surface what this game could be. Thank you so much for watching. If you've played Final Fantasy recently or any of these themes sound interesting, but you're kind of I don't really want to actually sit down and play this whole game, I've got another video, which is kind of a supplementary reading, what to read, watch, play, after you finish Final Fantasy 16, and I'll link that up there. If you liked what you saw here today, you can follow Media Mood Board on Letterboxd or Goodreads or just here on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Houston. This is Media Mood Board. Bye.